Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. Today we're taking a look at Dynamix, more specifically Dynamic Dino Dynamix, which is our dinosaur maximum monster. Now, this card is pretty cool. Overall, it's a bit of a fan favorite. I know a lot of people really like dinosaurs, people are really into maximum monsters, but without a skill dedicated to it, Dynamix does have several problems, which does prevent it from really being a meta contender, which is a little bit disappointing, but this is the best way that I personally have found to play it. Some things might immediately stand out. We don't have a lot of dinosaurs in this dinosaur maximum deck, and the reason being that the only real reason we have to actually play dinosaurs in this deck is that we have Mechtherizoraptor. We could include something like Super King Rex, which we were playing in our initial build for this deck, and Super King Rex itself doesn't actually accomplish very much. Being able to bring back a body is okay. When you can bring back Megazowler in something like Servant of Dawn, you can boost up to a 2400 attacker. That can sometimes be relevant, but bringing back basically just a 1500 or an 1800 vanilla is not too impactful, and as a 2500 that can't boost its own attack through any means, Super King Rex cannot beat other 25s. So we basically decided to forego it for Thunder Cavalry Trigger Drago. Trigger Drago is probably the best boss monster that isn't limit 3. And the reason being that it can gain 300 attack, which means it can attack over 2500s, as well as the fact it already has 2500 attack in itself, which means during your opponent's turn, it is at least a little bit difficult for them to get over it themselves, and it sometimes gains piercing, which is actually very, very good. Now, how often do we actually get this piercing? Not too often, but when we do, it is very, very strong. Other than that, the rest of this deck is basically maximum pieces and then just engine to kind of get where we're going. One of the benefits of having Trigger Drago as a boss monster is that we can run Sensor Duckbill, which does mean if we ever have hands that don't have very many boss monsters, we can just use Duckbill to find one, as well as if we do not have a Trigger Drago in the graveyard, we can just set this as a body and sacrifice it off to get out one of our boss monsters. So it works out quite well overall. Then we have the Aqua package, just because, again, we don't really want to be bricking on a lot of our high levels, and a lot of our losses on this deck were actually too having way too many high levels in our hands. So the Aqua engine definitely does help out at least a little bit in that regard. So one thing we haven't actually talked about yet is the skill. The skill that we have here is Set Mighty Gaze of the Sky Emperor, and this is a really weird skill. This is supposed to be effectively a Yggdrago skill, because we'll see Yggdrago's in the card art, the Sky Emperor is Yggdrago, but it doesn't actually work very well with Yggdrago because Yggdrago already has everything it needs built into its own kit, whereas Dynamix does not. But if we have a face-up level 10 maximum monster on our field, now notably, this counts as our middle piece when it's just regularly on the field, if we just tribute summon as a 1900 attacker, but also when we have our full maximum out in maximum mode, we can set one Mighty Gaze of the Sky Emperor from your deck or graveyard to your spell and trap zone. Now notably, this is not once per turn, so we have infinite access to Mighty Gaze of the Sky Emperor for the rest of the duel, which is pretty good. The actual spell card itself, again, is not very good in Yggdrago, but very good here, and the reason is we can send one monster from our hand to the graveyard to change the battle position of one monster on your opponent's field. Attack position becomes face-up defense, defense becomes face-up attack, then if we have a face-up level 10 monster on our field, we can draw one card. So discarding a monster kind of sucks, but we do get to replace that if we have a level 10 on the field, which is okay. Being able to get back the cost and effectively filter through our deck a little bit can be pretty good. But the most important thing here is Yggdrago can already change the monster's battle positions to change defense to attack so that we can attack over them and get to our opponent's life points, whereas Dynamix cannot. So Dynamix is a very, very flawed maximum monster in that on its own, it can't beat set 3 pass. This is its biggest weakness. Then we go through and talk about what it actually does. First off, while it's in maximum mode, if your opponent has no face-up level 9 or higher monsters, which means 9 is typically going to be fusion monsters and 10 is going to be maximum monsters, we can send one monster from a hand to the graveyard to destroy up to 2 monsters on your opponent's field. Now, this effect is nice. We can pop any monster face up, face down, doesn't matter the level. Obviously, it cannot pop 9s and 10s because the effect doesn't work if your opponent has a 9 or higher monster, so it can't out other maximums. As well as the fact its maximum attack is only 3400, means it can't attack over other maximums, so that's a little bit problematic. But being able to pop 2 monsters is quite nice. Unfortunately, if your opponent has 3 monsters in defense mode, we just pop 2, attack over the 3rd, get 0 damage in, and then our opponent just sets 3 again next turn. We have no way to deal with that. But that's where Mighty Gaze of the Sky Emperor comes in. We can flip a monster face up, pop the other 2, attack over, and get some damage in. Its other effects are this card cannot be destroyed by battle with level 7 or lower monsters. This does come up because things like Aggro don't tend to have a very good way to out our boss monster, but level 8 monsters can still kill it, so any level 8 and Talismanic Sealer will still just attack over, as well as the fact that maximums will just easily be able to attack over this. So it's a nice effect to have, but it's kind of a win more effect if we're already in a very good position. Sometimes we get to stay in that position. Then the other effect is just cannot be destroyed by trap card effects, which is pretty generic for maximums. So basically 2 of our effects are just destruction prevention, one of which is a bit flimsy, and the other effect doesn't beat set 3 pass. So it's very awkward in that regard, which is why we basically need the skill Mighty Gaze of the Sky Emperor. As for the rest of the deck, we're playing Monster Reincarnation because this gets back maximum pieces to our hand, which, you know, our entire point is just to go into the max, sit on it, and try and win the game. We are playing Talismanic Sealer because, again, we can't beat enemy maximums. We straight up cannot do it. So we need a way to beat them. Talismanic Sealer is the best way that we found. Reduce them and then just attack over them with Dynamix or with the Trigger Drago. We have Negate Attack, which, again, very, very powerful. Works in pretty much everything. It's also really good to try and stall out games so we can try to get to our maximum. As well as if we're able to get our maximum early enough and we manage to hold onto Negate Attack, we can protect it after opponents already used Talismanic Sealer, which is very, very, very powerful. We also have Buffered Slime, which again is really amazing. Again, it's basically here to buy us time and try and prevent us from dying, but it doesn't work on maximums. That's something you always have to remember. And then we have Music Prince's Recital, and that's just because, again, when we get our guy out, one of the most consistent ways people are going to get rid of it is they're going to use Talismanic Sealer and then attack over with a level 8 monster. So if we can just protect it with Recital, we can keep it around for an extra turn, pop that monster on the crackback, we waste our opponent's Talismanic Sealer, hopefully, because they won't probably have more than one level 8, and then we can get them on the crackback. So this is the deck. Overall, it's not very good. If we actually get the maximum out early enough, the deck feels okay, but the deck still has losing matchups against pretty much everything. Royal Rebels are easily able to just pop on maximum using Doom Metal. Blue Eyes White Dragon is a level 8 centric deck and thus easily can just use a Talismanic Sealer and then just attack over the max. It's really not a huge problem for them. Cyberse and Magnum Overlord are like built just to completely crap on this deck. Unfortunately, just other maximums that are bigger and stronger just generally get to out us. Our main boss monster is very easily killable via something like Tribute to the Doomed, whereas the other maximum decks do get skills to help them kind of find their maximum. We just have to kind of hard draw ours, which is a little bit awkward. Basically, most decks have some way to get to a level 8 or higher monster, and most decks are running Talismanic Sealer, so they are able to clear this without too much effort. And I think that's its biggest issue is Dynamix doesn't really have any positive matchups, and it has a very bad matchup into most of the field right now. So it's in a pretty rough spot. Maybe if we had our own skill that made assembling the maximum easier, the skill would also have to fix the fact that Dynamix cannot beat set 3 pass, which is a tall order. That would have to be a very, very powerful skill. But saying all of that, the deck is still kind of fun. Now, I would not necessarily recommend you use this deck to hit King of Games. You could hit King of Games with this deck 100%. I wouldn't recommend taking this deck to a tournament. You're probably going to get slaughtered. But if you're looking for some fun, casual Dino gameplay, I do think Dynamix is very, very fun. I do think that just summoning out a big maximum monster that can just win the game on the spot. I say win the game on the spot. You still have to win the game slowly over the course of 2 or 3 turns, but a lot of the time if your opponent can't out it, you just kind of get to walk over them. It's still quite fun. I do think the deck can also win without the maximum thanks to Trigger Drago, so that is another angle that we can play on. But overall, a little bit disappointing, just because I really wanted Dynamix to be a really strong meta contender, but without a skill, that just does not feel like it's going to be. So there are some other cards we did try in the past, the first of which being Piercing Dragon Bunker Strike. We tried to use this to basically turbo into the maximum. The issue with this card is it can help you find the max, but for several turns, oftentimes it feels like you're not doing anything. If we summon out Piercing Dragon Bunker Strike by normal summon, summon out the Bunker Strike, we have 2 cards left in hand. Let's say we can look at the top 3, so we now have 5 cards in hand, but then we have to put 3 of them back on top of our deck. That means for that turn, we're still only going to have 2 cards left in our hand, so we cannot summon the maximum outside of Seahorse Carrier. If we have Seahorse Carrier, we basically get to +1, which means we can do everything we want. So that was working sometimes, but most of the time what would end up happening is we would just end up with a bunker strike on the field with 2300 attack, be unable to clear anything, and then get destroyed on the retaliation. So it didn't work out too well, unfortunately. Another card that we did test a little bit is Rising Light Angel Essel. So Essel is best used in decks that can make use of the monster that you special summon, and also decks that you really want to be turboing into the graveyard. This deck, putting cards into the graveyard isn't too bad, right? We do want to see Canaan in the graveyard. We do want cards in the graveyard for Talismanic Seal Array, but if we mill the wrong cards, it can create more problems than solutions. That's why we didn't really like the milling aspect, as well as the fact that Essel can bring back Cavalry Trigger Drago. And this card can gain Piercing, which is actually relevant for a turn 2 play. Unfortunately, very rarely will it actually gain Piercing, because most of the time your opponent doesn't set 5. The other boss monster we could also get out is just the middle piece Dynamix, and then we could use our skill to get Sky Emperor, use this to flip something up and then attack over it, but a lot of the time your opponent's monster is going to have some attack. Now there are some monsters like Babysit Goat or Kana, which we can just attack over and get some okay damage in, but most of the time it's going to be a 1000, 1200 attack monster, and we'll just get in for a teeny bit of damage, and it doesn't really seem worth it. So all in all, Essel's payoffs aren't really that big in this build specifically. It still could, if we high roll, this card could still be really, really strong, but a lot of the time it's not going to pay off. It's not going to be as useful as we bring back like a Dragius or a Mirror Innovator. Those cards are always going to gain some really good value. So this is the list. Again, I wouldn't say this is competitive. I would say this is some fun. But if you really want to play Dynamix, I think this is probably the best way. If anyone else has any other ideas that they think might be better than this, feel free to leave it down in the comments, because I really, really like to make Dynamix into something competitive, but I don't think it's going to happen until we get a skill or a load more support for the dinosaurs. But let's find some replays so I can show what I've been talking about.
ラッシュデュエル。ラッシュデュエル。いつでもどうぞ。ラッシュデュエル。ラッシュデュエル。